Hello again, everyone. This is Alex Toth, Part 17. Alex Toth, Part 17. And this is, I believe, the final video of me breaking down the textual part of this series, of the interviews, of the memories of his fellow artists, of these quote-unquote Toth testimonials. So the next step will be to look over his art in all the art books that I have, which are very many. So let's just start here. And you know what? As with the other time, I'm not going to try to read Toth's handwritten postcards here. I'm just going to read the text from all the artists who are praising him. If you ever get this magazine, you can get Alter Ego number 63 to read some of that. It was also in the beginning here, or was it somewhere else, where they published Toth's Before I Forget column in handwritten form. So let's go. Peers and friends and admirers talk about, even to, the late great artist. Alex Toth was respected by his fans, his peers, his friends, even, for the most part, by those he might have considered his enemies. Although in the course of preparing this issue, I never ran across anyone who would have placed himself on that list, whatever disputes they might have had with the artist personally or professionally. A number of pros and collectors have expressed their feelings about Toth to me over the past few months. This section is devoted to those letters and emails, though it is far from complete. It begins with a longer reminiscence from one who was a contemporary and longtime friend of Toth's, a man whose work Alex consistently said he admired and was influenced by when he came into the business in the mid-1940s, and ends with a letter to Alex Toth that, in a sense, speaks for us all. Roy, as in Roy Thomas, Roy Thomas, he was the editor-in-chief of Alter Ego magazine. Roy Thomas is Toth and Nail Comics fanzine? Toth and Nail Comics fanzine? Huh. Okay, so it was Erwin Hasen, who also appears in the Toth documentary, Simplicity. And he was always a little confused as to why Toth liked his work. Either he's being humble or generally confused. It's funny. Erwin Hasen. Erwin Hasen became a professional comic book artist in the early 1940s, drawing Green Lantern, and a major Justice Society artist as well by 1947. I guess that's Erwin Hasen's work. I know Toth drew the early Green Lantern as well, Alan Scott, if that's his name. In 1953, he became the first and only artist of the long-running Dondi newspaper comic strip, and he and Toth were always friends, albeit in later years only from a distance, because Erwin prefers to use the phone, while Toth was a letter writer. Recently, with Dan Macara, Erwin published a small book of notes he received over the years from Alex Toth. Below is his introduction to the book. It is copyright 2006, Erwin Hasen. Now, I don't know of that book. Erwin published a small book of notes he received over the years from Alex Toth. I got to look into that. I got to actually make a note right now. Just give me 1 second. A little reminder, because I want to get it all when it comes to Toth. Okay. Thanks for indulging me here. I know that there was another book by John Hitchcock, which was Toth's, I guess, doodles. I think it was referring to as doodles. I think it might have even had the word doodles in the title. I know that one. I just don't know of a book of letters from Alex Toth that Erwin Hasen published, which I gotta find now. 2006, 18 years ago. How the hell could I have missed that? And I even read this already, so I'm just like a little surprised. Okay, so Erwin Hasen, this is from his introduction to his book. Alex Toth and I met at DC Comics in 1946. We were kids, all of us. Even Sheldon Mayer, our editor, was a kid. Shelley would, without provocation, leap atop his desk, brandishing his T-square, and shout, "En garde!" The youngest of us was Alex Toth. A like-minded fan of Roy Crane and Noel Sickles, I'm proud to say that Shelley Mayer claimed to have hired him, based on Alex's claim of being a fan of my own simple style of cartooning. Go figure. So, Irwin remembers his first meeting with Alex Toth in 1946. I guess he drew this. That's supposed to be Alex Toth, and that's him. Interesting. And this is also Toth, one of Toth's letters to Irwin. Okay. So Irwin Hasten continues. I fondly recall this kid, dressed in knickers, showing up at my West Side studio bearing a pot of his mother's Hungarian goulash and a stack of his latest work, wanting to be critiqued. Alex developed rapidly and soon became a top comic book artist. We lost touch when Alex decided to leave New York for LA and work for Hanna-Barbera doing animation storyboards. I never saw my friend again, but for 30 years he never stopped writing. Wow. It was always a delight to receive one of his letters or postcards, exquisitely hand-lettered, jammed front and back, crowded with cogent and unsettling appraisals of the human condition. Like lava from a volcano, his thoughts echoed his own personal angst. Well put. He became hermetically sealed in his own torment, yet never relinquished his own dogma of critique. Simplicity. And that is the true sense of any cartoonist's being. That is why I loved, respected, and admired this Don Quixote who, with his pen, never stopped tilting at windmills. Irwin Hasten, July 2006. Wow. Wow, okay. So, Manuel Aud, if that's how you pronounce it, he published several books on Toth, and I have at least three of them. His was the first book, must have been the 90s, late 90s. I remember going into a comic store and I heard that this Toth art book was being released. One of the first of Toth's art books, which was released at least about a decade, I think, before he died. And a few stores just didn't have it. One store ended up having it, and I was like, I kept going from comic shop to comic shop. And finally got my hands on it with a beautiful cover. I'm going to show it. It's the cover to the Alex Toth Part 1, my videos. And I skimmed through it as well. So I'm going to go back to that and look at a little more of the art in there. So Manuel Aud says, my friendship with Alex lasted over 25 years, but then it came to an abrupt end, which is the usual story from what I gather from Toth and his friends. I first became aware of his work when I came across his story in Crime and Punishment number 66. It was love at first sight. Thinking back on it now, it feels like an old fading postcard from the past. After all these years, I have a mental trunk full of postcards recording my friendship with Alex. One of my favorite commemorates the occasion when I finally got to meet him during the early 1970s. My wife and I were going to Los Angeles for the first time, so I wrote and asked him if I could stop by for a few minutes. He wrote back with 5 words, call me when get here, which I did. He said I could come over the next day. As I climbed up those interminable steps all the way up the hill and knocked on the front door, I really didn't know what to expect. Soon enough, a big bearded, menacing-looking man stared at me and asked who I was and what did I want. After I explained who and what, he hesitated for a moment, then gruffly said, well, you're already here, so you might as well come in. With that, I expected to last 5 minutes with him. 4 hours later, I drive back to our hotel with an original page from his Dell adaptation of the movie The Land Unknown, which I have to this day. Wow. Incredible. Yeah, those books are out of print. They definitely are. There was one book, Alex Toth by Design, which was a lot of his Hanna-Barbera character design pages. There's some storyboard images here and there, which became an outlaw book because I guess the rights, they forgot the guy's name, Daniel something, Daryl O'Neill. I guess didn't get the rights from Hanna-Barbera, so that book is it's an outlaw book, and I own it. Huh. That's pretty cool to have that. I'm just glad I got the book. Okay, so Manuel Aud continues. Another postcard would represent the day my wife and I were vacationing in Hawaii when out of nowhere I bumped into Alex. Who it turned out was also vacationing with Gila and his sons, Eric and Damien. We all took a tour around Pearl Harbor by boat and sailed past the USS Arizona Memorial. That evening, Alex and I met at the hotel cafeteria and talked till 2 a.m., when we were literally shooed away by the cleaning woman. That was the night Alex developed the idea for the story, Q. See, I don't know how to pronounce these, Aud, Q. Overall, it was a wonderful chance encounter. That's incredible. Bump into Alex Toth in Hawaii, wow. For all the years I knew Alex, I can't really say I heard him laugh out loud. I guess he didn't find too many things funny, except for one time when he was telling me about one of his visits to Irwin Hastings' studio, during which Irwin got a phone call from his mother. Apparently, she enjoyed talking to her son, but what Alex remembers is that Irwin would go, "Uh-huh," once in a while, or "Sure, Ma," "Okay," "Yeah," "Okay," and so on. After a few minutes of this, he would put the phone down and continue with the conversation he and Alex were having. That's terrible. Come on. A few minutes later, Irwin would pick the phone up again and go, "Sure, Ma. Okay. Uh-huh." And repeat the process all over again. Alex laughed so hard relating the story that he had tears running down his face. That's mean, man. That's mean, but funny. This particular postcard from the past has always been a mystery to me. During one of my visits to his house, he had just finished all the pages of Bravo for Adventure. He wanted me to see it and place it on top of the kitchen table. It was a scorching hot day. My throat was parched and I needed a glass of water. Alex graciously handed me a cool glass, and we stood there viewing each page. He suddenly stops me and says, "If you spill one drop on any of those pages, I'll kill you." And to this day, I often wonder if he really meant it. Well, I get it. Those pages were precious to him. That was his, his magnum opus. That was his final real, story that he wrote and drew. It ended up being, I think, 48 pages, but then he added another 15 to 20 pages, like a dream sequence. And then there were extras in the hardcover book that I have. I have a number of the hardcovers. I have an artist edition as well, which is beautiful, which I'll go through as well. I'm not going to try and analyze Alex as others have done, because that would be presumptuous of me. All I can say is when they created Alex, they broke the mold. And then someone named Will Murray comments, besides being a collector of and expert of comics and pulp magazines and a writer on fantasy films, Will Murray has written a Doc Savage book among his many other accomplishments. So Will Murray says, my fascination with the work of Alex Toth goes all the way back to the 60s TV shows Clutch, Cargo, and Space Angel. I loved his animated Fantastic Four as well as Space Ghost. Like Doug Wildey, he was one of that rare breed who shuttled back and forth between TV animation and comic books. Over the last year or two, I kept bumping into Alex Toth in the most improbable places. I wonder when he wrote this in the last year or two. In Sky Captain in the World... maybe he's talking about... Okay. Is he talking about bump into his work or into him in person? In Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, for example... Okay, I think I know what he's saying. That 2004 CGI extravaganza was inspired by a host of comic book artists, its creators told me. Giants like Wally Wood and Jack Kirby, among others. Production designer Kevin Conran singled out Alex Toth specifically. Even if he hadn't, there's a huge clue in this film strongly suggesting that it owes a large conceptual debt to Toth. While you're racking your brain over that, I'll tell you about the next time I bumped into Alex. It was only a year after Sky Captain came out. I was in Vancouver on the set of the Fantastic Four film. After touring the Baxter Building and other standing sets, I was led into the art department. The first thing that greeted me was a giant blow-up of the Fab Four. Not a Kirby drawing either. It was an FF model sheet done for the 1967 Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four cartoon. Toth's distinctive style made it instantly recognizable. I wasn't thinking of Toth last December when I was back in Vancouver on the set of X-Men 3, The Last Stand. He probably didn't cross my mind as I watched the Juggernaut chase Kitty Pryde through a succession of walls with pre-punched holes in them, nor did I connect Toth with the X-Men in any way. But Alex Toth did draw. I thought it was X-Men 10, but I guess X-Men 12. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kirby did the breakdowns and Toth did the finished pencils. That was his only Marvel work until years later, where he was supposed to do an Indiana Jones comic, which I discovered in the last video or 2 videos ago. It fell through. But he did end up drawing a number of Conan, like, splash pages, pinups, and they were great. They were absolutely great. It was great to see, Alex Toth's version of Conan. Pretty incredible. Look at this. Let me look at that art. Look at the letters even. It's fantastic. The war with the black ink. So he says here, Will Murray says, nor did I connect Toth with the X-Men in any way. Yet it was both fitting and ironic that Alex Toth should pass away over Memorial Day weekend. Why? Because, as I later realized, Toth worked on the X-Men number 12, which introduced the Juggernaut to the Marvel Universe. It was a wonderfully moody piece of storytelling and a sad turn of events when Toth walked away from that title. He would have made it soar. Yeah, he was one and done. I don't know. He was a searcher. He didn't want to stay in one place for too long. That's why people who prefer other artists over him, even though they like him, they say, well, he didn't stick to one, title, so he didn't have that kind of familiarity and stuff. And so what? Dave Mazzucchelli is known for his run on Daredevil for, about 30 issues, but he's done a lot of different things other than that. And he hasn't produced as much either. Similar to Toth in that way. Toth picked and chose his spots for a while. Did work that interests him, but he wasn't recognizable with one character. Again, the closest you can get is to Space Ghost. That's his one recognizable character. To some extent, he designed the costume and also did a one-shot comic book. I don't know, it was a short little story. It was great. Okay, so would Alex Toth have cared that a character he helped bring into the world had been part of box office smash that Memorial Day weekend? Probably not. But that and other examples of how his work infiltrated Hollywood show how influential this superlative artist was. And let's not forget that when Frank Miller acknowledged his inspirations at the end of his 2000 film Sin City, Alex Toth was prominent among them. I do remember that. Miller hasn't spoken much, if not at all, about Toth. Even though I do remember his name popping up there. I think because of the black and white, as simple as that. The beauty of Toth's black and white art. And Toth, the only thing I heard him say about Frank Miller was, Frank Miller, don't get me started. That's what I heard from Toth. I don't think he gave Miller a fair shot because his idea of Batman is of a friendly crime fighter, At least that's the way he seemed to draw him and speak of him. Whereas Frank Miller's was a creature of the night, a big, scary guy who the bad guys were terrified of. And I think if Toth had read Dark Knight, I think he would have appreciated it. I just do. He would have saw the innovation of Frank Miller's storytelling, in particular his storytelling, because that's a hell of a storytelling book. I mean, that book, the way he told that story it's fantastic. I mean, 16 panel, excuse me. Wow, sorry. I had to keep this. Had to charge this thing, my phone, because it was running out. Apologize. And I don't edit out these things. I mean, I make all these mistakes and I stutter here and there, and I do these type of things. But, what are you gonna do? But anyway, the storytelling in The Dark Knight Returns, which I'm going to review on here as well on my channel. But the 16 panel, grid for most of the pages, it was brilliant. He had a lot of talking heads in there, right? And it worked out beautifully for that. And it's a risky thing to do because people are like, what the hell, all these talking heads, and it works. And then every so often he has the splash pages throughout each individual issue. And then, of course, sometimes he breaks up the 16-page panels, right? The 16-panel grid, with having 8 on the bottom and then a big panel up top and so on, It's not always the 16, but that's the general setup for the pages. Whether those 2 of those panels turn into 1, so it'll be a 14-panel grid and so on. But it was just a very thoughtful way to design that particular story. So again, I think that if Toth had given Miller more of a serious look, regardless what he heard from others, regardless what he saw, maybe an initial look at his work, I think he would have appreciated his storytelling and his attempt to be simple, even though I think Miller busies up his art sometimes, not out of any authentic detail, just busy work, noodling a lot. But anyway, so prominent among them. Okay. So in Sin City acknowledged his inspirations. So how did Toth influence Sky Captain in The World of Tomorrow? Simple. Sky Captain flew an all-black P-40 Warhawk back in 1975. Toth drew for Atlas Seaboard's Savage Combat Tales #2 an evocative tale called Chenault Must Die. It featured a mysterious pilot of the Burma Air War of World War II. This flying tiger also flew an all-black Curtiss, page 40. Coincidence? I think not. Here is what Kevin Conran told me about the influence of specific comics artists on that project. There are guys like Will Eisner, Alex Toth, and Alex Raymond. Now that's an assortment right there. All great cartoonists. Will Eisner, Alex Raymond, and of course, Alex Toth. Alex Raymond, I have that book that Dave Sim did about the Curious Death. I think that's something along those lines. I forgot the title. But Dave Sim is drawing the entire thing. He's drawing things as Alex Raymond would have drawn them in his mind, and so on. And Toth comes up in there, and it's all these different artists who come up there, and the battles that Alex Raymond had with other artists, and so on. It's an interesting book. It really is. Anyway, so Will Eisner, Alex Toth, and Alex Raymond, the way they set up an image graphically, their use of black and white, particularly Toth, because this movie was originally intended to be black and white, and I don't think anyone ever utilized the simplicity of black and white as well as that guy. He did more with less than anybody I'd ever seen. Now that's something. He did more with less than anybody I'd ever seen. And keep in mind, it wasn't for a lack of effort. It wasn't for a lack of, again, there's a confidence there to know, to not be tempted to overdo it. It's like, and the setup, and again, Daddy and the Pie, that one story I told you about, which I'm going to read and show you guys. There's a table, there's a dining room scene, right? And there's a table there. And under the table, he drew all the details, right? From the tablecloth to the legs to the feet of the chairs to whatever, maybe a tile floor. And then he, I guess at one point decided, you know what, I'm going to black that all out. And I want to focus on what's above the table, the characters and the page they had. I think they had a map or something. And that takes confidence. That also tells you that he doesn't care as much to show off and say, hey, look at all the detail I put in there. He's like, yeah, whatever. That doesn't matter. I want them to focus on this part right here, not underneath. And if you look close in the better printed copies of that story, you can see all the detail underneath that was covered by black ink. By the way, the character Madman that Mike Allred created. I mean, look at Toth's drawing of Madman. I mean, it's the best drawing of Madman ever. I mean, it really is. It is to me. It's so damn good. And the three-dimensionality of that question mark there. Even this, that's a Toth one as well. It's just so damn cool. I got into it with Michael Allred at one point. It must have been after I won the contest, and I don't know what it was about, but I can't remember. I can maybe look back. It was on Facebook messages. Something to do with my drawing Muhammad and his uneasiness with it, but his admiration for it and so on. It was a push and pull thing. I admired him as an artist. I mean, I really enjoyed his Madman comic. It was very strange. Very funny, too. That's a weird Batman he drew. I don't care for the ears. It's like floppy. Okay, Mike Allred is a professional artist and writer and is creator of the comic book series Madman, among other things. In 1993, I was talking to an art dealer friend about how much I loved the work of Alex Toth and what a gigantic inspiration his work was for me. Okay. He did more with less than anybody I'd ever seen. And so Will Murray finishes with, if you could fit it into a headstone, that last sentence belongs over Alex Toth's final resting place, R.I.P. He did more with less than anybody I'd ever seen. Beautifully put. So Michael Allred says, in 1993, I was talking to an art dealer friend about how much I loved the work of Alex Toth and what a gigantic inspiration his work was for me. He told me he had Toth's address and a phone number and that I should send Alex some of my work. Needless to say, this was a terrifying prospect for me. Alex Toth's reputation as a notorious crank was well known to me, as well as his merciless critiques of artists far more established and talented than I. Still, I had nothing to lose and sent him a package of all my Madmen work up to that time. Several days passed, and I mustered up the courage to give Mr. Toth a call. I later found out that Alex rarely answered the phone, but in this case he did. He answered with an obvious suspicious tone in his voice, but I immediately introduced myself and asked if he'd received a package from me. He had, and his tone immediately changed from weariness to enthusiasm, not just about my specific work, but from what he gathered to be my appreciation of artists we both admired, like Roy Crane and the EC Crew. With his friendly tone, I was encouraged to ask him if he'd been willing or interested in doing a Madman drawing for me, which I would use as a trading card and a back cover pinup. To my crazed glee, he told me he'd already sent me a drawing of my Madman character, but that he'd be happy to send another to fill both uses. Heck yeah. I mean, come on. You know what I'm thinking, right? If you know my work, I would have loved to have seen his interpretation of Pigman. I mean, I would have loved, because Pigman was already born at that point when I was corresponding with him. Yeah. Alex and I stayed in touch for the next few years. I even visited him at his secret hideout above the Hollywood Bowl once. But like many of Alex's cronies, a ridiculous misunderstanding put me on the outs with him, but I never held it against him. His support and mentorship were like winning the creative lottery. It's always sad when stellar talent passes away, but with such a wealth of work left behind, for us to enjoy. His legacy is locked in for infinite inspiration. Absolutely. Tony Tallarico. Tony Tallarico has been a professional comics artist since 1952, drawing for Charlton, Dell, Harvey, Classics Illustrated et al. We printed his hand-lettered missive at right as it came to us. Okay. Dear Roy, just got off the phone with Jim Amash and he told me about the passing of Alex Toth. He thought you might be interested in the enclosed art and this. In 1947, I was attending the High School of Industrial Arts in New York City. The annex was on 51st Street off of Lexington Ave, blocks from DC Comics. One day I gathered up my nerve and decided to visit DC. I went to the reception room and was introduced to an elderly man wearing a blue artist smock. I don't remember his name, but he brought me inside to the bullpen where several freelancers were. One of them was Alex Toth. Alex greeted me like a long-lost brother, looked at my work and gave me words of encouragement. This 15-year-old was on cloud 9. He asked me if I'd like an original page of his. My answer, of course, was yes. Almost 60 years later, I still have that page. Thanks, Alex. Look at this. He was very young. Look at this art. It's beautiful. The Toth Sierra Smith page from Dale Evans Comics number 7, excuse me. So, Clifford Meth. Clifford Meth is a comics collector and professional writer. I had a very nice experience with Alex. I was a fan of his, as we all were, and I mentioned this to artist Gray Morrow about 10 years ago. Gray said, "Why don't you send Alex one of your stories?" I was just starting out at the time and was frankly a little intimidated by Alex, but I took a chance. In my letter, I asked Alex if he was available for a single spot illustration. Alex sent me one of his famous postcards that week. It read, September 7th, 1997, received Linda Tome. You write character dialogue like O'Hara and string words together so effortlessly, kiddo. Effortlessly, kiddo. Kudos to you. I'm poleaxed to focus. I'm pleased to focus on what and where to doodle. Perplexed, I guess, to focus on what and where to doodle a fitting illustration. Truly flummoxed. Cliff, seem a shoehorning job of a needless item into a perfect word picture. Love good writing. The stuff so rare in comics and animation, my two vexing venues. I'm ossified, I'm sure, by actually reading top story work and an invite to picturalize it. Last good strip material handed me was 20 years ago. I'll try, says Alex. 1 second. And then he goes, a week later, I received a drawing. When I called to thank Alex and ask him what I owed him, he said it was a gift. I'd always heard stories about what a tough, gruff old guy Alex was, but all I received was encouragement and warmth. I can say the same. He was just completely encouraging. David Cook. David Cook is a comics collector and college professor, as well as clearly something of an artist in his own right. Sounds great that Alter Ego will do a Toth tribute. There are some pieces that I did as collaborations with Alex posted into the website. Toth fans. Alex did a line drawing with Faber-Castell Pitt brush pen, then challenged me to add gray tones in Photoshop. Then he inked on top of my gray tones. We took it 2 steps further. He went over that with color pencils and translated his color guide into a Photoshop file. It's all in that one-man show gallery. I colored that for him so Bill Black could use in America's Greatest Comics. I also sent Alex a doodle of an idea, and he sent me back a much better pencil and said, finish it. When I did, he said, done good, Bunky. He sent me the attached Don Juan Arrow Flynn unfinished and challenged me to ink it. If your issue is all prose and not any friends, isn't a college professor a professional? I understand, and that's good. Alex would be proud. I thought I would identify myself, though. I would have placed more black personally, but, it does look like an Alex Toth drawing. Paul Power. Paul Power is an artist who knew Alex Toth for many years and conducted an interview with him that will see print year long. He sent the recent photo at left and a few passing comments which we were honored to receive. Yeah, that's Toth in his final months. Paul Power says, I just wanted to let you know that I acted and drew the storyboards on The Rundown. That was the film that Alex liked that starred Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He could see Dwayne as Captain Marvel. I agree with Alex. Interesting, huh? And, The Rock ended up playing, what's his name? Black Adam. He ended up playing the villain of Captain Marvel. I agree with Alex. Dwayne could play the good captain very, very well. I believe a film is being written as I write. The Rundown is a real adventure comic strip movie. I drew my shots with Alex Toth and Milt Caniff's Terry and the Pirates in mind. I think it shows. Check this film out. That one and La Bamba are two of my favorite films among those that I worked on. Okay, that's all I say about Alex Toth. Okay, Al Dellings. Al Dellings is a collector and fan publisher who, for some years, corresponded regularly with Alex Toth. Let's see. I've been a Toth fan since the late 1940s, but it was many years before I had the chance to meet him. In 1997, I did a book on Joe Kubert and the printer who did the book for me at his shop in Redwood City, California. Bill Sheridan was also publishing a fanzine of his own with the help of Jim Ivey called Cartoon News. I found that one of them, number 4, contained a 5-pager on how the artist Alex Toth worked. Upon seeing this article, I managed to talk Sheridan into doing an entire book on Toth under the logo of Feature Associates, which Bill had ties to. This gave me a chance to contact Toth, and we soon became good friends, and the book went over very well. Toth, lots of his fans, and even his mother loved it. In fact, she wrote me a 3-page letter describing her pleasure with it and how proud she was of her son. Alex was also delighted with his mother's approval, and he sent me a drawing of himself. Excuse me. Excuse me. A drawing of himself, showing how elated he was about it. That's hilarious. Result of reaction to book's reception and your kind words to my mom. Funny. Later that year, Alex spoke to me about his latest project, Jesse Bravo for Adventure, that he wanted to self-publish. Now that, again, he was before his time because a lot of the old-timers looked down on self-publishing. Like, oh, that's just a vanity project, man. You can't get published, so I did it. I love that. I think I think Frank Miller should self-publish at this point. Do some crowdfunding. He absolutely should. He got enough shit after he did Holy Terror and after he called out Occupy Wall Street, and he has this thing called Frank Miller Presents, but it was something like a joint thing with him and Dan Didio, or Didio, whatever, however it's pronounced. He should do his own. He should publish his own comics. He really should. He should try crowdfunding. So Toth was interested to self-publish his book, which is awesome. But he felt uncomfortable about sending his original artwork of the Bravo strip about, or even leaving his originals, about 100 of them, at a photocopy shop overnight to have photostats done. By this time, Sheridan and I had become partners in the print shop, and I'd learned the mechanics involved in the printing process, camera work, running the presses, stuff like that. So I suggested that Alex consider bringing his Bravo material up to the shop where we'd shoot the stats together and he could supervise the whole thing. Well, that suited Alex just fine, and he flew up to San Jose, where I picked him up and we proceeded to the shop in Redwood City. The two of us had a great time making photostats of his originals. I was a bit surprised that his original artwork was so small. Each page measured about 10 by 12. Interesting. Again, he was doing that and they look stunning, and it's so funny because This artist edition of Bravo for Adventure is big, right? It's a bigger than 12 by 10 by 12. And it's supposed to be a representation of the original art. So someone was, misrepresenting. But personally speaking, I want to see his art that big. I want to see that beautiful, chunky, black and white art that big. So, but we were able to shoot 2 pages at a time. As we did it, he'd explain how he'd white out some of the panels and change them a bit. Anyway, I talked him into staying over at my place in Millbrae for a few days, and we had a great time. We even got into a few arguments about the size of Errol Flynn's nose. I thought it was too big. Alex didn't. Haha. That's funny because he almost got into the word is that he almost got into a fist fight. Could have been with Gil Kane or someone else about the size of Errol Flynn's nose. I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious. Because Toth had his quintessential look that he had for his hero. Like Bravo for Adventure, Jesse Bravo was an older Errol Flynn. He looked like Errol Flynn. That's his model for what he loved Errol Flynn. And that was his model for, I guess, his hero. And some of the other heroes that he drew. My model, it's not obvious if you look at it, but it's James Dean. James Dean had a face, the kind of face that an artist would draw. He just did. Whatever else you might think of James Dean, whatever, but I have a bust of his face. It's like a face mask that they did for Giant when they wanted to age his character, Jet Rink. They put like a plaster of Paris. I don't know exactly what the process was, but they put it over his head, right? And then they took it out and they made molds of his face. And I have one of those molds. And it's an authentic mold of that 1950s thing that they had. And they have ones with his eyes open, which wasn't authentic because he didn't have his eyes open. They were closed. And I added my own art to it. I drew in the brows and eyelashes and a little other line work. It stands on my wall, and that's my model, for my main characters, whether it's Will or Killian in the story, in the Pigman story. So yeah, Toth had Errol Flynn as his main base for his heroes, and it's hilarious to me that he almost got into fights over the size of Errol Flynn's nose. That's just funny to me. It's hilarious. It's funny. Okay. A few arguments about the size. They got into a few arguments after 3 days about the size of Errol Flynn's nose. I thought it was too big. Now, I don't think it was too big. Now, because just in terms of structure of a nose, right? Like Tom Cruise has a prominent nose, right? Could be seen as a big nose, but the saving grace for him is that it doesn't droop down. His nostrils are, pretty much, the nose doesn't droop down. If it drooped down, it'd look really big. And it is prominent. I mean, you look at his profile, but because it doesn't droop down, it doesn't have that kind of honker look like the Gonzo, like I think a character from Muppets. And so I think that the same thing with Errol Flynn. It didn't droop. So therefore, however much it may have protruded, it didn't ruin the look of his face. He still looked like a handsome actor. Same thing with Tom Cruise. Anyway, I talked him into staying over my place Errol Flynn's nose. But this is funny to me that we even got into a few arguments about the size of Errol Flynn's nose. I thought it was too big. Alex didn't. Alex got along got along well with my second oldest cousin Larry, until Larry told Toth how great he thought Frank Frazetta was. Even so, Alex drew a nice headshot of Bravo for him. That's hilarious. I guess Toth had a problem with Frank Frazetta. That's funny to me. We spoke a lot about his family, his wives, stories that inspired him to work on, and his two favorite people, Noel Sickles and Errol Flynn. Those were his heroes, you know. I can just see Alex now, most happy to finally be with the two guys who inspired him, his work so much. Oh, and his mother too. There was something alluded to in maybe one of the early interviews I did with some of the guys where there was something to do with his mother, an issue at home, they kept saying. It was an issue at home. I don't know what it was, and no one was willing to say so. But Toth he had his mother at a very old age. He was still seeing her and visiting her when he himself was very old. And the people, when they spoke of it, he had nothing but love for his mother. So maybe it was something, maybe it was a protective thing. Maybe, I don't want to assume anything, but maybe something, his mother was being abused. I don't know. Maybe by his father, or maybe not. I don't know. But I know that, I think Joe Hubert in his interview, he alluded to it, but didn't get into any details. But every time Toth spoke of his mother with love, with care. And again, he got to see her for as long as he lived. I mean, for a long time. And his mother too. Just phoned. Now, this is, I guess, Alex Toth to Al Dellings. He wrote this postcard. Dear Al, it was February 1978, February 18th. Just phoned Pat Boyette in San Antonio, who told a buddy who bought a copy of our book there and who said it was worth $10. How about that, Charlie? I'm pleased to hear such responses as I thought it was a bit high-priced. Listen, I must thank you for all too generous comments you wrote to my mother regarding my work. She read every word to me over the phone and was happy with the book. I mean, that's just so sweet, you know. An older cartoonist, he was only 50 at that point. I mean, he wasn't that old. But I think from what I remember, even when he was in his 60s and 70s, his mother was still around. If I remember correctly. Interesting. Listen, I must thank you. Okay, I told Pat his copy was in the mail. 4th class, I hope. Anywho, we're getting nice responses, I guess, from Bravo for Adventure, from those to whom I've given my copies, and I could use 6 more, Al, if you would please. Deduct costs from my profits, royalties for all of them. Remember, you guys ought to pay for my generosities regarding freebies, okay? Thanks for saying. Not much new here. Same old thing at Hanna-Barbera. Mark Evanier has been assigned a 4th Hanna-Barbera book to edit, produce for us in Marvel Incorporated. He edits a ton of work, yet still writes TV, live scripts, etc. A veritable study in motion, Doing a good job, too. Books are selling well, too. Enough said. Again, thanks. That was good to hear that Bravo for Adventure was selling well. I ordered this book, right, through eBay. Paid for it, waited for it, and then the guy who had it emailed me and said, I'm so sorry, I spilled grape juice all over it. I'm like, okay. I couldn't find another. So if anyone out there, if anyone listening, if you have a copy of The Art of Alex Toth and you want to sell it, let me know. It was in the 70s, published in the 70s. So then Luca Biagini, if that's how you pronounce it. Luca Biagini. I imagine so. I love the Italian language. It's so fun. It really is. Italians, they speak with their hands. I think this is it. Wow, I think this is it. This is the final page. Yep. There's one thing. Russ Manning, The Lost Works. Russ Manning, I was nominated for the Russ Manning Most Promising Newcomer Award, 2004. This is his work. Yeah, so this was Ruben Procopio, August 2006, a few months after Toth had died. I think he died in May 2006. But that's it. I don't think there's any more about Toth in this magazine. So this is the final, unless something else comes up, unless I find something, this is the final part of me discussing the ideas, the thoughts, the memories of Toth by other artists. So next time, I guess Alex Toth part 18 will begin to look at his work, to look at his artwork. And so Luca Biagini writes, Luca Biagini is an actor in Italy who appeared in various films and was a longtime correspondent of Alex Toth's. It seems appropriate to close his tribute to Toth with the imaginary letter to Alex, which Luca sent us by email. Imaginary letter? Dear Alex, I hope you can read this letter wherever you are. I guess he's writing after Toth died. I'll miss a lot of our long discussions on our beloved old movies. Do you remember? You liked Vittorio De Sica, and I liked more Fellini. I often think of your deep grief when you told me that Marcello Mastroianni was dead. We are becoming two persons who think too often of the past. Do you remember how you liked the last works of Hugo Pratt? I continued to send you books and magazines with his stories, and you told me about your meetings with him in Paris and Barcelona. I am sure you have met him again where you are now. I guess, yeah, he wrote this posthumously after Toth died. Good luck, old beloved friend. I miss you so much. A strong hug from your test dura, as you called me. Ciao, Luca. P.S. I often dream that you are flying in a Curtiss P-40 in some hidden skies. It was your secret wish. Here's bottom right. Luca Biagini once received from Toth this homage drawing of Scorchy Smith, the aviator hero of Noel Sickles' 1930s comic strip, Scorchy Smith. Awesome. That's fun. Crash landed, bandage around his head, but still alive. It's awesome. Okay, so thanks for listening, watching up until this point. This was very pleasurable for me. I read all these, and rereading them again was really just great. Great to revisit Toth's ideas, thoughts, and then also what others thought of him. So next time, for the next video, I will begin to show you, because I wanted to tell you why I think Toth is the best, and next time I'm going to show you why I think Toth is the greatest comic book artist ever. And, I'm not here to convince you. I know he is. And I just want to show you why I think he is. So until next time, everyone, thank you. And if you could subscribe to my channel again, I would appreciate it. If you like this video, if you can like it, and if you could just spread the word, I would appreciate it. Thanks again. Take care.